continue that way?
Well, because it's 2015 and
That's how
we're
we do
optimistic
things.
for a new Hamilton.
All right.
Speaking of a new Hamilton, we need one. Apparently, when it comes to our infrastructure, things are falling apart. And much like the roof on your house, if you ignore it for too many years, and yes, I'm speaking to myself here, eventually it's going to cost more and more and more. So you have to invest in infrastructure. You have to get things fixed in a timely manner. Apparently, we've not been doing this, and now we have a $1 billion, that's with a B, a $1 billion infrastructure deficit. Loren.
Absolutely. Nobody wants to run because they don't think they can get elected on we're going to put in new sewers and they're not going to explode on your streets anymore. The only people who vote for that are the ones whose basements have already flooded.
Right.
There is nothing sexy or interesting or wonderful about infrastructure stuff. But the conundrum on all of this is, you as the taxpayer, you as the voter, do you want to just keep delaying this and putting it on the backs of our collective children and grandchildren, while taking the risk that the city, like, it's all well and good to have bus lanes until those lanes explode due to garbage infrastructure. The problem for the city of Hamilton is that they, like many municipalities, feel that the province and the feds need to pony up some serious dough to do this. And if the city of Hamilton starts tackling this in a bigger way, and I mean significantly bigger way, on their own, then the province and the feds feel less pressure to fund infrastructure projects. It could be endless, the amount of improvements. And those aren't, when you say the word improvement, it's not like, oh, now our roads are better. We have a crumbling old city.
And it's not just roads, right? It's,
of course.
It's also municipal buildings,
and
it's
bridges,
rec centers,
and
it's everything. Remember in the US a few years ago when the bridges started to all fall apart and they realized, whoops, we haven't been investing in our bridge infrastructure. So it's something that you need to have fixed. And of course, as you mentioned, Loren, if you fix the problem too much locally, then it disincentivizes the other levels of government to pony up. Something that I often see, you know, with not-for-profits or people who have budgets from the government, it's like, well, you know, they have to play a little bit of a game where they want to make sure they keep getting funding, right? Whether they need it or not. So, Hamilton Council, to my understanding, this was not catching them by surprise, thank goodness, since most of them have been there forever. So I think they've been putting, what, about 1% or a half of 1% or something to try to...
It's a 0.5% increase every year on the budget, but that's not even remotely catching it.
Yeah, it's, well, we're at $1 billion now. And with infrastructure repairs, like the roof on your home, the longer you leave it, the worse it gets, the bigger the crack or whatever, the bigger the problem, and then the more it costs later.
What I think would be some really good positive messaging on this would be to take an example of crumbling infrastructure, whether that be a neighborhood street sewer who exploded, and explain the cost of what emergency repair is versus proper maintenance and replacing stuff that needs replacing. And that spending money today within the budgetary means is actually a savings for when things crumble under emergency circumstances.
The old analogy or the old challenge to the taxpayer. Do you want to pay less now for something you don't want to pay for, or way more later? It's the ounce of prevention, pound of cure. Can I throw a little curveball at you? Because I just saw this story or heard it on the news today. I don't know if you've heard about it. But apparently when the Red Hill floods, it affects, I think it's Kings Valley Golf Course, a city-owned golf course, right? So now they just voted in committee that they're going to spend $1 million fixing the wall around the golf course or something along those lines in that area, some infrastructure around the golf course and the flooding for the valley in order to prevent damage to the course going forward. My issue with that is $1 million, and they're going to single source contract it because this particular contractor has expertise with Red Hill Valley construction. I agree with Lloyd Ferguson. I believe we spoke against that in committee, saying, you know what, we need to do competitive bidding on projects like this because we need to keep the tax dollars down. So on the one hand, you know, we're making this argument that you got to pay now or you pay more later, and this seems like an issue that's costing the city money. But at the same time, we're still talking about a lot of city money that floats around here, and single source contracting at $1 million. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Loren?
Well, that's $1 million of infrastructure spending to save a golf course owned by the city of Hamilton. And I wonder whether or not that golf course would get $1 million expenditure like that if it wasn't owned by the City of Hamilton, which leads me to the question of why does the City of Hamilton own and run golf courses?
It is. I was wondering if you were going to follow that particular string all the way up.
That's a little odd to me.
And the single source of contracting is disconcerting. I understand under a $5,000 level just for the sake of expediency, but at $1 million, I don't know.
Nope.
On issues around construction, et cetera, I always listen to Lloyd Ferguson because he is the guy on council who has actually run a construction company. And by the way, just this is a side topic again, Pan Am Stadium probably going to miss more deadlines going forward. And so the city now found out that the Pan Am transportation is going to be taken over by the province. Lots more we'll talk about probably next week.
I'm hearing there's really serious issues.
Yeah, and Lloyd Ferguson was all over that this morning. So we'll probably pick up on that next week depending where the story goes. Okay, issue 3. New mayor, more money. What? Why does Mayor Fred Eisenberger need so much more money for his office than